Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Tuesday's PhD support group meeting. I am Dr. Leni Liebenberg, Professor Leni Liebenberg, getting used to that. And I am very happy to be hosting you today, especially because we have Lewin Moodley back with us for the second of 4 sessions that she'll be giving this year. So in the last quarter, we had her speaking about emotional intelligence and how to harness this to enhance your performance and your productivity. And if you missed it, it should still be up on the UKZN YouTube website. It is a goodie, so please go check it out if you have not yet seen it. Today, Lewin will be discussing with us the benefit of accountability and how to achieve greater results through using it. As always, I need to mention that these are very casual sessions, they're supportive sessions. Please feel free to place any comments or chats, comments or questions in the chat box. Embrace using those reaction icons to show your support for the content, and always please feel comfortable enough to engage during the discussion sessions. We love that. I must say that really is a treat to have Lewin Moodley volunteer her time with us today. Thank you, Lewin, because we are absolutely getting this professional, world-class, useful advice and information from someone who's qualified, a qualified business coach. She's a program designer. She's a registered skills development facilitator. She has over 10 years of experience in learning and development within financial sectors and insurance sectors. So we really are very privileged to have Lewin Moodley join us here today. Thank you so much, Lewin. We are very much looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Dr. Liebenberg. And then welcome to all of you. I'm really privileged to be here again. As mentioned, this is my second session for this year, and the topic for today, as you must have seen on the initial slide, is accountability. Now, accountability happens to be one of my values, but also through developing this workshop, I've learned something, and of course, through facilitating it as well, I've learned something new during this session. So I hope to provide that for all of you as well, just a different perspective when thinking about being accountable. Just to confirm, Dr. Liebenberg, can you see my presentation?
I can see it. Very nice, very bright, very exciting.
Excellent, fantastic. Then we can dive into things. As I think some of you may know by now, that I like to start with a definition. So you'll see that in front of you. Accountability is the acceptance and the obligation to carry out responsibility. In short, the fact or condition of being accountable / responsibility. So before we get to what that means in practice, I sort of want to get I'd like to hear from you what comes to mind when thinking about accountability. You may not have the same feeling as the definition as it says right there. You may have a different feeling or a different thought that comes to mind when thinking about accountability. So I'd like to give all of you the opportunity to voice or to showcase what you think about, what it feels like for you when somebody says that you are accountable. So to kick things off, if you don't mind going to menti.com, I'm sure Dr. Liebenberg will also put that code in the chat box. But just so that you understand, you have to go to www.menti.com, and then of course that code that you see over there, you just punch that in, which is 59559756. And I'm going to share that screen in a moment where we can see your feedback. But the question is, what comes to mind when thinking about accountability? So it may feel, for example, for you that it's in a situation where you feel you're being blamed. There's like a blame that's attached to it whenever you think about accountability, or you could think that it has to do about finding out who's responsible, or it could be a negative feeling that you have when accountability is spoken about. I'm going to share that feedback in a second, so just bear with me. I'm just going to share the screen so that all of you can see the results. So on the screen, and I'm not sure how to move that. Okay, let's do that. On the screen, you can see some of the feedback. Anxious, deadlines, responsible, scary, scapegoat, concern, negative, taking charge. I like that one. So again, just to remind you, it's about what comes to mind when you think about the word accountability. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds for other people to provide their feedback. Blaming, procrastination, concern, trustworthiness. I think I said deadlines. If you look at those words, most of them has sort of a negative feeling. If we look at blaming, scapegoat, well, obviously negative, anxious, procrastination. And generally that is the thought when people think about accountability. More often than not, we have a negative feeling associated with accountability, and that's truly not what it's about. So for the purpose of today's session, I hope to change your perspective into something that's more positive. Because for me, that's what accountability is. It gives me power, and I hope that when we go through this lesson today, you can have that feeling as well. Okay, I just have some more. I think we've added ethical, scary, responsibility. When the words go a bit bigger, it means that more people are capturing the same word. That's why it increases in the font size. Okay, so I'm going to move back over to the other screen. Where is my stop sharing? New share. Okay, great. I'm just moving over to my other screen. Let's just drag that over here. Excellent. So now, if we review accountability in practice, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios. And I want you to think about, in the scenario that I give you, what would you more than likely choose to do in the scenario? Okay, so let's kick it off. The scenario is as follows. You receive a telephone call from your cell phone provider stating that your monthly repayment was not received. The cell phone provider is adding a late fee and requesting their payments or their repayments immediately. You are very surprised since this is an automatic deduction which is debited from your bank account. You contact your bank and discover that they had a software problem and your account was debited in error. They have since fixed the problem. So long story short, the payment that usually gets deducted from your cell phone provider was not received because of your bank. They had some sort of software issue and therefore the payment could not be deducted. So now you have a choice of one, you have one of three options that you can choose from. The first option is option one, transfer the payment to the cell phone provider, explain what happened, pay the late fee, and request your bank to reimburse the fee. That's option number one. Option number two is pay your monthly repayment only, sending an explanation to the cell phone company as to why the payment was not received. That's option two. And then finally, option three is pay the monthly repayment and write a letter asking the cell phone company to reverse the fee, explaining what had happened. It's not your fault. I already have some answers. So if we go back to menti.com, you'll find the new question on the screen, and if you can just choose, make your choice. When you go to menti.com, you will still see the options in front of you so that you can choose accordingly. Okay, I'm just going to give it some time. I'm going to just move over to that screen so that you can see what was chosen. So far, we have option 3 in the lead. Pay the monthly repayments and write a letter asking the cell phone company to reverse the fee and explain what happened. Just going to add another minute or two to get people to add in their vote. The feedback I usually get in the scenario, for the scenario, is it's not my fault. The bank was supposed to do, it was the bank's fault. So the bank needs to ensure that either they pay the penalty fee or the cell phone provider needs to reverse that fee. All right. So as it stands for option 1, we have 40%. Option 2 has 13%. And option 3 has, well, it's changing as I'm talking. So far, option 1 and option 3 are in the lead. Okay, I'll stop it for now and we can continue. Okay. Let's just move back to my other screen. Excellent. Okay. So just so you know, it hasn't changed. It's still on 44% for option 1 and 44% for option 3. So just to provide you with feedback, in this scenario, the most accountable response is actually option 1. And I want to explain that to you. So as a client, I have 2 agreements in play in the scenario. One agreement I have with a cell phone provider and a separate agreement with the bank. So in the agreement that I have with the cell phone provider, I arranged or I stated that I will ensure that on a certain day, I will make my monthly repayments. The cell phone provider probably stipulated that they could make it easier for me and they could deduct this payment. Having said that, and even if they do the deduction, it's still my responsibility to ensure that the payment is received by the cell phone provider. The separate contract I have is with the bank. So the bank obviously houses my money and probably most likely from my salary that gets paid into my banking account. But there's a different contract that happens over there. I cannot assign blame to my bank account because the bank account, my bank is not a part of the agreement that I have with my cell phone company. If I had to choose option 2 or 3, which means that I'm only going to pay my monthly repayments and I'm not going to pay the penalty fee because it's not my fault. It's the bank's fault. So either I'm going to ask them to, I'm going to provide an explanation explaining that it's the bank's fault, or I'm going to ask them to reverse it. This is what I'm requesting of my cell phone provider. I don't know if they're going to agree to do that. So if I choose option 2 or 3, there's a good chance that the following month there could be a higher penalty, a larger fee that I would have to pay in because of that late fee penalty that occurred in the first month. So my point is, by choosing option 1, it allows you to remain in control of the situation. It allows you to find a solution in that you can ensure that the cell phone provider gets what is due to them, which is the monthly repayments and potentially the late fee. Then we can hold the bank accountable for the penalty that you incurred. You can then write them a letter and give them proof to say, look, I received this penalty or this fee because of the software issue that you had on your system, and therefore you are liable for this fee. And then you could be reimbursed. The point of the story is option 1 is the most accountable, and it's the one that allows you with control over the situation and over finding a solution for the situation that you're in. So when it comes to accountability, I want you to see it as having control to resolve a problem that you are facing. The minute you are blaming someone, or if you're looking outward, you are releasing that possibility or that opportunity to find a solution. When you are accountable, it gives you the power to remain in control. And in this situation, you are ensuring that the cell phone provider gets what's due to them. So no further penalties can occur. That problem is solved. The issue stops right there when it comes to the penalties or the penalty fee growing. Then you can move to the bank and sort of enforce or hold them accountable for their actions. All right. I'm going to move on to a clip that I'd love you to watch. I hope you can hear the sound. If you can't hear the sound, please let me know.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I'm a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the first, a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
That last little sound is always so loud. I'm sure there were some of you that was sitting and watching the video and laughing and thinking, because you can totally relate to it. You can relate to what Brene Brown explained in that video, because we do it all the time and it happens so quickly. We so quickly make the connection with whose fault something is and how we can point out it, because it can't be us. It has to be somebody else. It's easier. And it's quick. We do it so quickly. I know that scenario is probably copy and paste with what happens in my household. Maybe not water polo, but some other activity that my husband does. But I do the same thing. So I'm sure that all of you could relate to that. So I want to introduce the Oz principle. where it has the above the line response and a below the line response. And the Oz principle itself, the name is derived from the movie The Wizard of Oz, which is a story about 4 characters' journey to personal accountability. So I want to start with the below the line response. And this is the situation where we are making those connections and those calculations with figuring out whose fault it is, as long as it's not my fault. And again, I want you to think about the minute we are pointing outward, we're releasing the opportunity and the possibility and the power we have to find a solution or the control over that potential situation. We're pointing outward and we're releasing it. We're giving that power to somebody else when we want to keep it. And the scenarios for the below the line response is when you say things like, I don't have enough time for this. This is not my job. Nobody showed me how to do this. This is their responsibility. All those things are where we are pointing outward and we looking for, or we blaming somebody else essentially. And when we do that, we're not finding a solution. We're standing still with that problem and it's going to come back. So we need to try and bring that inward and find a solution that we can implement that works, that we don't have to deal with it again. Because when we look out, when we're blaming other people, that's like a plaster. It's going to come back. That problem is not fully solved and it's going to come back. So we need to move away from the below the line response. I want to show you this clip of what below the line looks like.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do.
So every time I play this clip, obviously in face-to-face sessions, I have the learners looking so confused at me, and they'll be like, "Lewin, why aren't they moving? What's happening here?" And the fact of the matter is, yes, the scenario sounds insane, but that's what it looks like when you have control and you have the power to do something, but you'd prefer to point outward and get somebody else to do what needs to happen, blame somebody else, and stand still, no moving, when you can and you have an opportunity to do something. So this is over the top example, but that's what's happening when we are pointing outward. We're blaming somebody else and we're not moving forward to solve the problem, essentially. So, and let me tell you, when it comes to being above the line and below the line, people think that it's easier. It's easier to complain about something than to do something. But you're just delaying the problem coming back again because it's not solved. And many a times I have training sessions and the learners sometimes, generally when I provide a session on a change that's happening in the business, sometimes I will have complaints around certain issues that they may have in their teams or in their department. And this is not isolated to one organization. I mean, almost in every organization, I would have a session which is pretty much the same thing, where the learners are complaining about this process or this system, or I don't know, a manager's not doing something, or whatever the case may be. And I want to help, but more than wanting to help, I want to show them something. And I promise you, at the I will instruct them to send me an email writing down the issue as they see it, what the problem is, and then a suggestion in terms of how it can be fixed. And I promise them that once I get that email, I will action it. I will review the proposal and I will ensure that the proposal gets to the correct person, and I'll provide them with feedback. Every single time I don't get that email, I've never received that email, because it's easier to blame somebody. It's easier to complain about something than to actually do something. And with being above the line, or with operating above the line, you are giving yourself the power to change, to fix something, to implement a solution that works. So I'm going to explain the above the line response. So essentially, it's about behaving above the line. You are looking inward, you are accountable, you have control, and you are empowered. And it entails 3 steps. Sorry, not 3, 4, where you need to see it, own it, solve it, and do it. Now, I'm telling you, this is really, really difficult. The first step in seeing it, that's the hardest part, because we don't see it. We're too busy thinking about whose fault it is, making those connections, because it can't be our fault. It can't be me. It has to be somebody else. It's like such a quick reaction as and when it happens. And let me tell you that I found that in myself as well. I do these sessions regularly, and I enjoy facilitating sessions. That's obviously my passion. And I'm sure if there are any other lecturers or facilitators in the room, they'll understand that when you are conducting a session, we are very observant and we watch the faces and we pay attention to the facial expressions. And sometimes I won't have good facial expressions. I can see people's eyes rolling, they're getting tired, or they're getting bored, or they'll be staring at me, but they're staring right through me, obviously not paying attention, or they'll be scribbling notes or whatever the case may be, totally disinterested in the session. And that's tough. That's tough for a facilitator. It's really hard, because you obviously want to have a productive session. You want people to walk out feeling energized and excited. You know, it was a great session. That's what you hope for. But sometimes you won't reach that level. It won't be a good session, and it's tough. And then, going home, I'd reflect on the day, reflect on the session, and I'd be like, I can try all these things, but I mean, people are just like overworked and they're underpaid, they're exhausted, they don't have time for these things. It's just not going to work. And I would believe that. I would believe that story that I would tell myself. And I'm sure there's some people listening to what I'm saying that probably nod their head while I said that, because you believe it too. But if you think about what I said, I was actually blaming my learners for my session being unsuccessful by saying that they're overworked and underpaid and tired and whatever. And the minute I did that, I removed the opportunity for me to do something about it in that moment, because it's not my fault. So I can't change anything. I can't implement anything. I can't do anything, because that will always be the outcome. That's not true. If I think about it, there are many things that I could do to change that. But the minute I pointed out to it, I didn't even think about those possibilities or those options or the ideas that I could implement to change it. And when I realized, that was a really turning point for me, and I realized what I was doing, and I had to stop that and I had to change it. And I gave it some thought. And there were a couple of things that I could do to change the outcome or the productivity of my sessions. One of the things were, for example, I cannot do sessions on a Monday and a Friday. That's a no-go. It's just not going to work. On a Monday, everybody's worried about the long list of priorities or tasks that they have to do for the week, so they're not going to pay attention. On a Friday, people are thinking about the weekend. I mean, what's the point of the session over there? And so maybe I should try the other days is fine. If it's an in-person activity or session, then I have to have some sort of snack. People love food. So either like a snack or sweets or whatever. And of course, if it's face to face, then I can also have a couple of activities because people like to do other things other than just listening to someone speak. So by looking inward, that's what I mean to say. By looking inward, I gave myself power and control over the outcome I want to achieve. And I could think of innovative solutions to implement to change what was impacting me. And that's the question that you have to ask yourself. So just for a moment, for the next 2 minutes, I want you to think about a situation that you are in, or the last time that you said something like, it's not my fault, or it's not my responsibility, or somebody didn't let me know, or somebody didn't train me, or nobody showed me how to do this. Whenever, just think about the last time. It may even be happening right now. Think about a time you blamed somebody else. And I like to tell my learners that there's 2 important questions you need to ask yourself. So while you're thinking about that, ask yourself these questions. First question is, does it impact you? So in my situation, with my learners being bored, of course that impacted me because I want my sessions to be productive. The second question is there a chance? Is there a possibility that this event, this scenario can happen again? And in my situation, of course, there's a possibility that it could happen again. Those are the 2 questions you need to ask yourself. Does this impact you? And is there a chance or a possibility that this could happen again? And if your answer is yes to both of them, then it means that you need to act. You need to do something because in some way you are accountable to that. You need to do something to change it. And on occasion, you could find that you do act and you do implement a solution, but it still has the same result. It doesn't mean that you should give up. It just means that maybe that solution didn't fit that problem. It means that you need to go back to the drawing board and think of a different solution and then try that again. So in conclusion, does this impact you? Because if it's something small that it was a once off, you went to the shop and the lady was a bit mean, I mean, that's not a big of an impact. You may not ever see that lady again. But if it's something where there's a chance it can happen again, then you need to act. So only if it impacts you and if there's a chance of it happening again, then you need to go to the drawing board, think of a solution and implement it. In any event, the first thing that you need to do is you need to see it. So hopefully we're thinking about your scenario the last time you blamed somebody. Perhaps that's your opportunity to see or to acknowledge that there is a problem, something that you need to do or something that you could potentially do. So you need to be honest with yourself, consider the facts and recognize the reality of the situation. We need to be, when I say be honest with ourselves, because in that moment when we're making those connections and blaming somebody else, we're not really being honest. And we need to be true because, you know, we really don't want to blame ourselves, but we just have to look at the factual information. That's what I mean over here. So you need to see it. And it's very difficult to do because we miss it, again, being too absorbed by making those connections, but you have to try. I think the trigger point for you can be the minute you blame somebody else, you need to look at that and review and analyze that situation. So acknowledge the problem. Own it. And this is a tough one because acknowledge that you contributed to the situation that you're in. And that's true. You have contributed in some way to the situation. You played some sort of role in the situation that you are in. Get perspective of others. So if you cannot find clarity, sometimes it's good to get the opinion of a colleague or a friend or anyone else and get their input to make it clearer, because sometimes when we emotionally invested in something, we cannot see things clearly. And then act on feedback that you receive. Solve it. Ask yourself, what else can I do to get the results I want? Test assumptions and recognize that some things are out of your control. Finally, it is do it. So that's take action, implement your solution, follow up relentlessly, and measure your progress. In that situation, again, I just want to mention this again. You may not find the fitting solution upfront. That doesn't mean you need to give up. It just means that you need to go back and think of a different solution to implement. Because the whole point about this is, or about being accountable, is that when you are faced with a problem, it's about having control, implementing a solution so that that problem doesn't impact you again. It's ticked off your list, and I can imagine we have 1,000 tasks on the list. It's ticked off your list and you can put it to bed. That's the aim. Okay, so for the next activity, what I'd like to do, I'd like to give you a couple of scenarios. And in the chat, I would like you to tell me who is accountable in the scenario that I'm going to give you. Okay, so in the chat, just let me know who you think is accountable. Let me open up my chats. Okay, the first scenario. Right, a supervisor assigns a task to Jane to complete. Jane accepts the task but was not able to complete the task on time. Who is accountable? I'll give you a moment to capture your message in the chat. So we have supervisor, Jane, both Jane, both are accountable, both, lots. Okay. So it's mixed reviews, but I think it's leaning towards Jane. So the person who is accountable, the correct answer is both. Both the supervisor and Jane are accountable in this situation. And I'll tell you why. The supervisor assigned a task to Jane. The supervisor is still accountable for that task. Yes, it was delegated, but the supervisor needs to ensure that A, Jane is able to do this task, and B, that Jane can complete it on time. So that's number one. If the supervisor had to ask the question when Jane did not complete the task on time, if the supervisor had to ask, does it impact me? Of course, it impacted the supervisor. Is there a chance of it happening again? Possibly. So the supervisor would need to implement something in that situation so that it doesn't happen again. It could be having a conversation with Jane, making sure that Jane can come to the supervisor if there's any further issues. Does Jane need training? That sort of thing. Jane, on the other hand, it was Jane's task, and Jane was supposed to complete that. If Jane felt that there was a possibility that she was not going to complete that task on time, she should have communicated that because it was her responsibility. Yeah, so essentially both. Right. Second one, who is accountable? 5 people are allocated to a group to complete an assignment together. Everyone is contributing to the task except one student who seems to be slacking. Who is accountable? In the chat, let me know your thoughts. Some answer is always everyone. I like that. All 5, the group, everyone, all 5 people. I think you're getting it now. we can all get an F. So everyone's accountable. That is the correct answer, because the group was assigned a task and everybody was accountable to ensure that they contribute and they hand in this assignment. It's unfortunate that we have one person slacking, which tends to be the case generally. But all students ultimately are accountable for that assignment. And whether one person is slacking or not, we need to work as a group in order to either get that person on board, but ultimately we need to hand in this assignment. Yeah, we're all accountable. Very good. Oh, I think I just had 2 scenarios. Okay, great. So then,
Lewin,
yes,
sorry,
yes.
there was a question in the chat box. What can the group do about that?
So that's a good question, and I've actually had that come up before. So I know this is a common scenario where somebody slacks in group projects, and we make assumptions, and we get angry. But first of all, in order to take control of the situation, you need to get creative and think about what you can do. And there are things on the table. So the minute you're saying, that person's lazy, they're just never going to be a part with it, just leave that and let's just move forward. We're not really taking control because we're blaming somebody. So we need to think about what we can do. We can think about, let's have a discussion. Let's find out. Maybe we can have a one-on-one. Somebody in the group can have a conversation to understand what is the issue. We need you to do this. Why aren't you contributing? But start with a conversation. So that's one thing that you can do, to get feedback, to understand. Are you overwhelmed with stuff happening at home? Do you not have computer access? Is this not something that you're familiar with? Are you struggling? So those are the things that you can start. You can have a conversation with that person, and you have to be smart about how you have that conversation. If you remember the emotional intelligence session that we had, wording is key, because you need to be mindful of the landmines or the booby traps when you communicate. So you have to be careful there. But getting their feedback and then thinking about, once they provide their feedback, thinking of a solution together to be able to solve that problem. So for example, if the person says, I don't have internet access, okay, then we'll give you tasks that don't involve using internet, for example. If they say, I'm not familiar with this topic, that's fine. Then focus on this side of it. I don't know, but essentially it starts with communication, and not just making assumptions. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you a little task to do on your own, in your own time. But before I get there, are there any other questions that you have around accountability that maybe you're unsure of, or I haven't explained it clearly enough before I provide you with that little task? No. Yes.
Oh, okay, this is an odd question. I'm sorry. At what point is it actually okay to blame somebody?
So I will refrain from using the word blame. And yes, it is okay, but I would see it as holding someone else accountable. So in terms of the Oz principle, you need to look inward, because you need to think about, what can I do? So you're reviewing the things that are within your control. Some of the time, in some occasions, you need to hold somebody else accountable. That means that, Jane, this was your deadline. You communicated and you confirmed that you were able to meet this deadline. What are you going to do going forward, for example? So that's about, and remember, it's really not about finding blame or casting blame. It's all about finding a solution. Yeah, that's pretty much it. How does one deal with a person or colleague who keeps blaming others? So that's a difficult one. So first of all, I would want you to think about what your outcome would be. What is the outcome that you would like? Would you want your colleague to stop blaming others? Do you want your colleague to realize that what they're doing, because sometimes they don't know that they're doing that. I would perhaps start off with a conversation and ask that, do you know that you do this? That you tend to see this or blame this person or that person or whatever, they may not know. Another suggestion would be to ask questions, because I've noticed that when you ask questions, it allows people to think differently. It allows them to change their perspective. So for example, if somebody says, Jane was supposed to do this on Friday already, you can ask a question, but were you worried that Jane was not going to complete it by Friday? They said yes. But then if you knew that, so then why didn't you perhaps send a reminder on Thursday? Because if you don't want that to happen again, for example, then maybe you want to get ahead of it. I don't know. So you could do it subtly like that. Either you can have the conversation or you can ask questions to raise a different way of thinking, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Okay. Or another solution, I think it's Hakima, you can get your colleague to join one of my sessions. That will help. Okay, and then for the final activity, and this is to be done in your own time. So first, I really hope that I change your perspective on accountability. I really want you, I don't want you to have a negative feeling around accountability. For me, always, I see it as having power and control to choose or to navigate towards the outcome that I want. And I want you to see it that way. Think first about, what can I do? What am I able to do? And that could include holding someone else accountable. Those two questions are very important. Does this impact me? Second question, is there a chance that this could happen again? If the answer is yes to both, then you need to implement something. That means that somehow you contributed to the situation that you are in, and you need to act. Okay, here's another question before I give the task. I find questions like, who was responsible, feel blaming, but rather say, what could we have done to do better and improve? That is absolutely correct. It's really not about blaming, it's what can we do differently? Yeah, essentially that's what we need to do. And sometimes people are so focused on who we need to blame, which doesn't help a situation because we're standing still. It's really about, let's review what went wrong and let's figure out our way forward. That's what we need to do. Okay, so this is really a tough strategy to implement because I've mentioned earlier that the hardest part is seeing it, seeing that you contributed, or seeing that there is a problem, a situation that you need to act or that you need to do something about. So what I'd like for you to do is thinking about the Oz principle, thinking about acting above the line. I want you to consider a current frustrating situation, something that is bothering you this very moment. It's a problem that always arises, something that is an irritation. I'm sure all of us have a problem like that, whether it's in your personal life or in your working world, if it's anything. And I'd like you to implement the Oz principle. I want you to think about, change your perspective. Don't worry about casting blame, because obviously we covered that already, but let's look inward. Let's think about how you can approach this problem differently. Remembering the question, does it impact me? Is there a chance it can happen again? Yes and yes. Okay, let's go to the drawing board. What can I do? And I'd like you to trial it. trial the Oz principle and see if it assists you, if there's a different outcome, a better outcome. And maybe in the next session, or even if you'd like to, you can email me to let me know. But I'm really interested to hear your feedback, and I'm sure you'll find that it helped you. I'm just adding my email address in the chats for those who would like to email me your feedback. That is correct.
You're going to get a slew of emails, Luan. Are you prepared for that?
I forgot the word email. Please, me at. That's what happens when you multitask. Okay, great. Yes, I'm ready for all the emails. I'm very intrigued, and I love to hear this feedback because I always use it in my upcoming sessions. So it will definitely be good for me too. Okay, so then, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of my session. I really, really sincerely hope that I could change your perspective of accountability into something that's positive. It really is a good thing. You have the power and you have the control to find that solution that you need for your problem, essentially. Are there any other questions before I hand over to Dr. Liebenberg? No. So if that's the case, thank you so much. Hope you have a lovely day. Over to you, Dr. Liebenberg.
This was such a fantastic session. You know, I've seen it before last year, and I'm still as gripped right throughout the session, knowing that, you know, I can absolutely do better. It is a very tough exercise. What I really thought was just so profound was one of your first opening statements was, accountability gives me power.
Mm?
I think that's my new mantra right now. You know, I'm going to write it on my desk and just, you know, see it every day. It's my new favorite thing. Elliot, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to say something?
It's just a comment. I really appreciate what we have been presented with, and you know, it's very interesting that when trying to be above the line, I also realize that in the current situation that I'm or challenge that I'm experiencing, I have I have also contributed myself, you know, to be in that kind of situation. But the way I've been following it, I've been also using feedback from people trying to go forward. I also think that I can also use the strategy of actually mentioning why I think I also contributed, although it was not intentional. You know, so that you know, yeah, just to take responsibility for, yeah.
Thanks, Elliot. It's something that we should all be mindful about. Sorry, Luan, you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say that that's really amazing that Elliot was able to review the situation and see that he did in fact contribute to the situation that he was in, and that's exceptional.
I see there's Ntabi Singh. Maploy, you are unmuted. Would you like to ask a question? No?
No, yes? Thank you.
Oh, okay, no problem. I have a comment, if you don't mind, Luan. I just wanted to tell you. So I interviewed somebody for a position recently, and I asked her, so tell me about your strengths. And one of the strengths, you know, I'm disciplined. One of them was, I hold myself accountable. I am in charge of my actions. And I was like, did you perhaps join Luan's session last year? She did, by the way.
Oh, that's great. That's amazing. I must say that when I also did an interview once, and I like to ask the question, what are your values? And very seldom they say accountability, but when they do, I get excited.
It just shows the impact and the importance of these sorts of sessions. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for taking your time, for being with us today. And we'll see you again sometime in the next quarter. I think you'll be speaking to us about effective communication. That's going to be another goodie. So with that, let me just spend a second again to say thank you very much to Lou and Moodley for being with us today. We had overwhelming support in the chat box, and thanks everybody for your participation during the sessions in Mentimeter, within the chat box as well. We look forward to additional future engagement in the next sessions. Next week, we have Prof. Desh Archery who will be joining us speaking about time management, how important that is, how to do it right. So Desh is a super planner, she's a super multitasker, she's a super focused, if that's even a word, she's very focused, she gets things done. And she points it down, holds it down to good time management skills. So she'll be with us next week to tell us a little bit more about how we can do the same. For anybody who would like to review these sessions, the recording will be up on the UKZN YouTube website. If you know people who absolutely need to have some more information about accountability and how it could work for them, especially if it's somebody within your working group by any chance, point them to the UKZN YouTube website so they can also see the accountability session and the emotional intelligence session held by Luan. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your participation, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.